we kick off today, this is going to be a very open discussion. If you have a question, drop it into the Q&A. I'll make sure that it gets asked. But without further ado, let's talk about what we're talking today, which is build versus buy. This is the first of a two-part series, how to build your demo environment at scale in 2023. So that's obviously a very pertinent topic. And first, of course, we have Jakub Suchy here. Jakub, how are you? Thanks for joining us today.
Good, thank you.
Jakub is a sales engineering leader and coach at allthingsdemo.com. In the past, he's run demo engineering teams, created and crafted demo scripting for entire sales engineering teams, and of course has experienced firsthand how difficult it is to build and maintain demo environments. I have a feeling we're going to circle back and talk about that today. And then, of course, Dan Katz, who's one of the locals here at DemoStack. He runs the solutions engineering team at DemoStack. He's been involved in pre-sales most of his grown-up career, even before he knew what the actual name for the super cool job was. He was doing it. Before DemoStack, Dan led demo engineering teams at enterprise open source company, DXP Company, where he also managed teams of SEs and was an award-winning individual contributor himself. I expect nothing less from someone here on the team at DemoStack. And you're in Southern Maryland, right?
Buddy? I am, yeah. I'm as far south as you can go in Maryland.
So is that Washington, D.C.?
Yeah, it's near Washington, D.C., yeah.
Okay, but so
it's Carolina Light is how I call it.
Carolina Light. Okay, that's interesting. That's a conversation for another day. So gentlemen, let's kick off. And again, please, if you're in the audience, don't be shy to drop a question to the Q&A. I will be checking you regularly. But some of the key things we're going to talk about today is the cost of developing your demo environment. And then another thing that I think we're going to get into is the kind of democratization of the demo. Can everyone actually demo? And then what do you do when you have a hero complex, either on the engineer side or on the AE side? How does that all work? But let's take it back a little bit to a jumping off point here, Jakub. What are some of the key things strategically that you're looking at when it comes to demos going into 2023?
Yeah, to me, it's a term you just kind of started with, which is demo democracy, right? And I'll admit I was the one in sales engineering teams or social engineering teams that always said, no, the SC is the expert on demo, the SC will be doing demos. But I've changed my mind, and I don't really know what it was that changed my mind, but I think that at this point, demo democracy is what I'm focused on, which is why I'm kind of launching my All Things Demo as well for consulting, because I think there's no excuse that we shouldn't be able to allow everybody in a company, which includes account executives and even others, to demo. So that's why my focus right now is demo democracy, enabling everybody to be able to demo.
So let me flip that to you, Dan. Why is that how it's always been? Why is it that just the solutions engineer or the sales engineer is the one demoing? How did that become the way that it is?
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of friction and bottlenecks there, where in order to present a tailored demo to a prospect, the solution engineer needs to customize a demo asset or cobble things together from different solutions that you're trying to sell. And so it limits the amount of deals that you can really effectively work on, right? And so if we think of the AE's job is to really own the revenue, and the SE's job is to convince you that this solution is better than competitors, better than something you could do yourself, or better than doing nothing. If we can remove that friction, then we'll be able to get more and more conversations happening to get those technical wins and to secure that revenue. So for me, it kind of ties back to removing friction as my demo strategy for 2023.
No, and I love that. So let's talk about that. So Jakub, in your experience as a leader, where does that 40-hour week typically go for a sales engineer in your experience? Where are they spending their time?
So Dan and I, we worked together, and we had something that we called activity, right? And activity tracking was something that was really important to us. And if you look at it, there's a lot of time you're spending in internal meetings, right? One-on-ones and things like that. But you're also spending a lot of time doing prep for meetings and prep for demos, dry runs, and then delivering to customers. And we all want to be able to deliver as many activities, as we call it, to our customers, right? But a certain amount of time is spent on prep. Now, to me, the topic at hand of building environments is that with kind of the first salespeople you hire at a company, or other people that you hire at a company, at some point you realize you need to build a demo environment, and then you ask your SEs to start building demo environment, right? And when you do that, they're actually spending time on building demo environments instead of front of customers. And if you want, we can talk about how much that costs, right? But
we'll get to that, Jakub.
We'll get to that, but you're spending time building demo environments instead of delivering to customers.
And if you take that to that next level, once it doesn't scale anymore to have your SEs building and maintaining environments, you might want to set up a whole demo team. And you and I both had that at our previous gig that we were talking about. And essentially the job of that team almost is building and maintaining a separate product from the one that you actually sell. And so I think my team, we had 7 people full-time at our peak. Their jobs all day, every day was customizing this demo environment, trying to get data into that environment to tell stories that the SEs could use, enabling SEs, working with product to bring new features in. It's really a full-time job, and we had 7 people around the world just focused on that.
That's really interesting. Nathan has a great question regarding demo democracy. A lot of software companies will say, our platform is too complex for AEs to demo. SEs always have to demo. Jakub, when is that actually the case? So let's take transactional sales out. Let's just think from kind of an enterprise or longer sales cycle type process. When is it okay for someone other than the sales engineer to demo?
To me, that was the #1 excuse I used when I did not allow AEs to demo in my previous company. It's too complex. And sure, the product might be complex, but we're not talking about account executives doing all of the demos in the entire sales process, right? Ultimately, we still need solution engineers to do complicated stuff or some complex stuff, but we might be talking about, can you pick one 5-minute scenario and story from your product that's not that complicated and allow an AE to demo it in the discovery call and frame it as a discovery, right?
Yeah, a discovery demo. And you used a word very intentionally there, Jakub, story, right? So when I think about, oh, the demos are too complex for our AEs, are we really delivering the right kind of demos then? Are we really delivering demos that tell a story, that help your prospect imagine themselves using your solution and being successful? Or are we trying to be the smartest person in the room and go through how cool our product is, how the features work, how the integrations work? There's a time and a place for that, depending on who you're demoing to in the sales cycle. But AEs should be absolutely empowered and enabled to tell stories using the product as the supporting cast.
Really well said. I like that. So, both you gentlemen, I know, have been involved in a lot of creating demo environments. So let's look at a really high 30,000-foot view. Jakub, what's the first thing you're looking at? What's the first thing in the thought process when it comes to building a demo environment? How do you take a step back and actually assess what you need to plan out?
I think that you need to start thinking about ultimately what you're building. And I think you need to start thinking about, am I building a demo as a story? Am I building a demo as a technology feature set, right? Or am I building something else? And I think the answer is probably all of the above, right? And I think that the key thing that's on my mind is actually what Dan said, is that it's a separate product. And I think the most successful kind of demo infrastructure out there I've seen is when you treated the demo as a separate product, because it is. It's using your own company product, but it goes on a completely different cycle, right? It needs to be somewhat tuned to the cycle of the product development so you don't get behind. But very often you're actually getting ahead. That's the situation when maybe you need to start demoing a beta product that's not ready for customers, right? So it's a completely separate cycle that requires a lot of thought into how you actually manage the cycle, right? That's kind of the main thing that's on my mind when you talk about how do I build a demo or a demo infrastructure or demo environment.
But Dan, isn't that a little bit overwhelming if you're thinking about this as a separate product? I mean, is that kind of, as an engineer now, you're thinking, wait a minute, am I actually building the product, or am I building a product of a product?
It is. And I think you have to figure out what is the right balance that you need between I think of it boils down to like flexibility and control, right? So like it may be a separate product, or it may be more of a framework or a set of tools and components that you can use to change some parts of an existing product to tailor your demos for a prospect, but not have to build something new every time.
But what happens when you have a product update, right? Like something as simple as that. How does that affect
It depends, right? It depends on how well integrated you are with that product development lifecycle. In an ideal world, before any product feature gets released out in the world, before any sales enablement starts telling your AEs about it and how to sell it, it's already in the demo environment, and your SEs have been enabled and understand how to use it in the context of a demo and how to position it. But I think what happens due to pressures inside of an organization and tight schedules and things is developers want to deliver. They want to build cool stuff, right? And so we want to get that out into the market as soon as possible. And the demo environments very often get left behind and kind of put into a catch-up mode.
It's actually, you just reminded me of this. We fought this all the time, right? Like the cycles are so different. Do you think that like product develops a product and you get it, and the next day you're spitting out demo stories and demos based on the product, right? No, it takes weeks of effort to actually do that. And now if you think about a product release cycle, do we now think that the product is actually finished, let's say 8 weeks before its release, so you can do your demo? No, right? The developers are actually making changes into the product, like up until the release, all the time. So the product is constantly changing, and you have this dichotomy of two release cycles that actually don't align with timelines, right? And they're usually, my experience is 6 to 8 weeks off, which is actually a lot of time.
Oh, you can do a lot in 6 to 8 weeks.
Yeah, you
But
can in the product, right?
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
in your demo.
Okay, so Dan, you've built now this demo environment. It's up and running. What typically goes into the maintenance of building an in-house environment?
Oh, where to start on that one? Data is the first place that I would go, right? So data is how you tell your story to your prospects. Is it aligned to the vertical you're selling into? Is it up to date, right? Is it last year's data, or does it look like it's data that is current? So that's the first thing, and I've had a lot of challenges in the past keeping demo environments feeling fresh, right? Because you're not able to get live data from a customer environment. You wouldn't want that, and you may need to then build scripts or leverage other third-party services where you can ingest data to keep things looking good. And then you need a way to easily update and edit that data so that it connects with the person that you're trying to tell a story to. So for example, if I'm pitching to a medical technology company, the data, the content in my application is going to be really, really different than if I'm pitching to CPG or a FinServ type company. So being able to swap that out quickly, or have a library of different sort of overlays or masks that you can put on is really important, and is not always an easy thing to do.
And I think, as a side note, you said something along the lines of, you wouldn't want to have live customer data in your demo environments, right?
Why not?
You'd be shocked at the amount of people that actually do that.
Really?
What are the risks of that? I mean, I can't imagine.
And I'm shocked when I see people doing that, right? And even I remember a situation where we worked on some data project to kind of add beautiful data into the demo. And somebody kept suggesting, let's just copy this customer database and let's change the data, make it anonymous and stuff. And I was like, even if the project is 10 times harder, we're not going to do this. We're not going to put this data into the environment. We're going to lose control of it no matter what. So you'll be shocked the amount of people that do that.
Related to the data is access, right? So who has access to your demo environments? It's not just within your company as SEs and AEs come and go, but how many times do prospects want hands-on access to a sandbox or a POV environment? You know, we've called them before. That's a nightmare to manage as well, because you don't know what they might also have access to, or there may not be a good automated pruning process in place, right, to get rid of those logins after a period of time. And you could end up with all these people having access to an application that you're not even aware of anymore.
I saw a demo environment. It was a 200-person company, right? And the demo environment had a little bit over 800 to 900 people in it.
Oh my God.
How's that possible?
Well, every employee of the company invited 4 to 5 people. You know, the point is not that like you should not be able to invite people, but what you're not doing is the maintenance, which is like that access might need to expire at some point, right? Or even if it doesn't expire, have you added something to the environment that's now supposed to be visible to that specific person?
Yeah, it relates also to you know, the idea that why are we sharing 1 or 2 environments among so many people? Like, what's the implication there? Nick, you asked about what does it take to maintain. These environments can be really unstable, especially if they're shared and you have different people doing things in a global company, different times a day. You can be in the middle of a demo. I think every SE has probably had this experience, and something bad happens. And you can make a little joke about it and work around it. That's part of the art and the craft of being an SE. It can really make or break that kind of activity.
I couldn't imagine that. Like, you know, I'm showing up to go and do my presentation and suddenly there's a different screen behind me, right?
Oh yeah, it's usually just the Wi-Fi. You know, there's like a network issue, and so we can ignore that.
We all have a favorite sentence.
Yeah.
Right. It's my Wi-Fi. The laptop's really slow. Now you know it's a real demo because it broke.
No, I love that. Now you know it's a real demo. That's a great one. Another great question from Nathan. So on the subject of data, a lot of times sales teams have to ask their prospects to ignore the data in the demo and imagine something with their own data. So getting prospects to imagine can absolutely be valuable, but having bad data can also affect the credibility of the seller or the product. What's your take on that, Dan?
It depends, right? It depends who you're talking to and how and where you're at in the sales cycle too. If I'm giving a second call kind of executive overview type demo, a canned demo, you know, I may not want to put a lot of effort into tailoring it and customizing it. Maybe I could change the logos and change some names and things like that, or lightly skin it. But there's an expectation at that part of the relationship that I'm just kind of getting an overview here. If I'm, you know, 3 or 4 demos deep with a prospect, or I'm in more of like a POV type motion, I better be able to show them relevant data, because they have to act as a champion and sell that internally as well. And it's really hard for them to do my job. I might be really good at saying, hey, Nick, all right, I want you to close your eyes. I want you to imagine, you know, sitting down and smell of popcorn and in the breeze. Like, I'm good at that. That's one of the reasons I love.
You have popcorn in the breeze?
Yeah, totally. You don't have that in your demos? But what I'm saying is you're putting the burden on somebody inside of the organization to try to SE on your behalf and to sell on your behalf internally, and to ask people to imagine things, where that conversation internally is like, imagine, like, show me it working, you know, show me how this is going to help us reach an outcome. And so you do absolutely need to have data that's relevant. It may not need to be a lot of data, but it needs to be enough data to support telling those stories that are in your demo.
I think I'll go further, right? I 100% agree.
Further, Jacob, I'm ready.
It's win rates. Like, this is a theory, but the practice is this will be affecting your win rates. Absolutely, right? Because if you think about it, you're asking the customer for a lot. And I've been saying this sentence for a couple of weeks. Dan heard me say this, that we're like 25 years into like modern demo techniques, and yet they're not being used so much, So demos overall, I think being delivered in the market are still way too complicated for my liking, right? So we're asking the customer to understand a lot. I am a person that demos, and I've seen the product 1,000 times, while my prospect, this is the first time, or maybe second time after a discover demo, they're seeing the product. And so I'm asking them for a lot of imagination. They already have to imagine themselves in the product. And so now if I'm asking them for the next step of not only imagine yourself using the product, but imagine the data is yours and looks like yours, there's just way too much to ask of the prospect. And I totally think it's going to be affecting your win rates. And there's no excuse at this point. If it's a 5-minute discovery demo by AE, fine, right? But if it's a custom demo in a later stage of a deal, there's no excuse, in my opinion.
Yeah, and as an SE, I can easily take that for granted, because like you said, I've done a demo 1,000 times. I can do it in my sleep. I can imagine. But I was at a concert earlier this year, or maybe it was the end of last year. It was like Poison and Def Leppard with my daughter, and Poison Poison gets up on the stage. Bret Michaels is out there doing his thing, and how many times have they played that song, right? Whatever they're doing. But for a lot of people, it's the first time seeing it live, and so they need to they got to put their all into it, like it's the first time they're doing it, and make it accessible to that audience. And it's really not that different. What we have to do is we can't assume that just because it's like, I don't want to use the word boring because it's never boring, but it's like repetitive sometimes, the stories, that we can assume that the person on the other side is going to just get it.
I love that analogy. Yeah. Concert. That was great. You drew a really good picture there.
Yeah, and then now take it back to demo, right? Like demo environments. When you ran that team of 7, how much of that time did we spend not like maintaining the product, but actually creating tools for customization so the imagination didn't have to be there?
Yeah, a lot of time, for sure. I think I used the word framework before. We called it a demo framework, and a lot of it was, here's your recipes. I think person who worked with us who called them spells. Here's the spells for if I want to show this particular scene in a demo. Here's all the stuff on the backside you have to do to make that happen. Or if you want to show this scenario, here's what you have to prep and do. And a lot of what we built, it wasn't even about what the customer saw. It was about trying to make it easier for SEs to create those experiences.
Yeah,
this is great. Okay, I want to go back. There was one thing I wanted to kind of still uncover when it came to maintaining an environment. So Jakub, let me ask you, what is the human cost of time that goes into maintaining an in-house environment? I want human hours, Jakub. I want it itemized.
Human hours, so money. Well, I'm a big fan of value engineering, right? And so I was actually thinking about it as prep for this. So think about it this way. If you have an SC that has a $2 million quota, which is a reasonable quota for an SC, right? I think that, and I don't want to talk about hours, I want to talk about activities. Every activity the SC does for a customer, if you calculate it, and we can put the calculation somewhere out there, that probably means you need to get somewhere between $12,000 to $15,000 in ARR from every activity you do for a customer, right? Assuming the amount of activities you can do and assuming your normal win rate, which means that every activity you do as an SE on build and demo environments because your manager asked you to, that means you're not making $12,000 to $15,000 in ARR. And that's both unfair to the company and to yourself, because you probably have a quota, unless you're a very small company when there's probably a team quota. But once you're a little bit of a bigger team, at some point, you're going to have an individual quota. So your manager's asking you to work against your quota.
Super deceptive too, as an SE in that situation, because you feel like you're doing the most important job in the world, building that demo and customizing that demo. You feel so, you get the little dopamine rush, right? You're like, right, I made it work. It's looking good. What you're ultimately accountable for is getting that technical win and getting that revenue. if those hours and those activities could be spent in front of customers, you'd probably be able to achieve that more quickly.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, right? Like, we're not saying that you should never be doing any of this work. It just needs to be valuable work, like building the stories themselves, right? But if you're maintaining basic infrastructure, that's just not worth it. That's $12,000 to $15,000 per activity.
Okay, so let me ask you, Jacob, then I have a 200-person company and I have how many, well, let me ask you this. How big is my sales engineering team with a very technical product in a 200-person company?
I would ask, how big is your AE team, right? But let's say
I have 15 AEs.
15, 20 AEs.
Yep.
So you have a handful of SEs. So you probably don't have a very large team because your ratio, you have 100%, you have less than 15 because the ratio will not be 1-to-1 at a typical SaaS company. It's probably not going to be 1-to-2. So you probably have 3 to 6 people. Right?
So let's say I have 4 plus leadership. So of those 4, how many of them are spending most of their day maintaining the in-house environment?
Well, some of them will be probably, let me give you an example. I think it's a couple hours a week from what I've seen for those people.
Even if someone else is maintaining the demo environments, those SEs still have to refresh their own instances of those environments, configure them, pull in different things from those other environments.
But that makes sense. So you know, on a 4-person team, I'm spending 10 hours a week on maintenance. And but now you're saying, Dan, that's even if I have someone maintaining the environment already.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, that's a lot of human equity. So, all right, Dan, you're building this in-house environment. You're excited for it. We've already kind of talked about some of the challenges, but like, what's one challenge you know that you're going to run into typically when building an environment?
I have to pick one.
You can be 3.
Maybe 3. It's 1 seems like a lower bar, so I'm gonna stick with 1. Who owns it? Who owns it? Is it R&D? Do they own this environment? Is it operations, the same organization that owns like customer environments? Is it pre-sales? And if so, does pre-sales have the decision-making capability and the money to do what they need to do and support it? Does support own this environment, or is support available to help if there's a problem with this environment? If those questions aren't answered before you go down the path of building and running a demo environment, you're stuck with it. And you're going to be in a very reactive mode when something goes wrong. Have
you picked this one because I have a lot of very big opinions about that?
I'd love to hear your opinion. Well, let me ask you, Jacob, who owns it? Who's responsible?
I would say R&D and engineering never, ever, ever, ever owns demo environments. Period. As simple as that.
Who does?
I think pre-sales owns demo environments. And I'll give you the one reason. It's a completely different motion. It's R&D, their job is to deliver features to a product at a fast pace and a predictable schedule. There's no such thing as predictable in pre-sales and solution consulting. It's a completely different motion. And when you have R&D owning these environments, I think that at some point, when it gets really hard, R&D will make a decision that to keep their predictable schedule, your updates needs to wait.
Right. We'll put it in next sprint. We'll schedule it a month from now, right?
Yeah.
No, we have a presentation in front of an analyst, or we have a presentation in front of a huge prospect here. We need this feature working this week.
And Dan, by the way, because we worked together, you did a tremendous job of doing this. Getting your demo infrastructure on a predictable roadmap and schedule is hard. And Dan did a great job when we did that. But we need to acknowledge that having a demo on a predictable schedule also means that at some point somebody will ask, okay, drop everything right now. And this is what we're working on.
Right.
And product teams cannot do that. It's not fair to, it's not that they're not capable, it's not fair to ask them to do that.
So Jacob, let me ask you this. If you walk into 10 companies with demo environments, what percentage of that 10 does sales engineering own the environment?
I don't know. I think, Dan, what do you think? 50-50?
I was going to go a little lower. I think maybe 30-70.
In favor of which one?
Sales engineering owning 30% of the time. I think they're very dependent on engineering, especially in smaller companies.
So how do you pull them across then, Dan? How do you get them onto your side?
It's a great question. It's something I'm still thinking about a lot. I think in the traditional motion of a traditional demo infrastructure, the right solution is to have an R&D team inside of pre-sales, which was kind of our demo engineering team that we talked about, right? That isn't on a sprint schedule, that is capacity driven and demand driven, that can support things when they need to be more custom than just the standard kind of demo customization, personalization type stuff. But I also think you still need to have a connection to other parts of the organization, operations, we're gonna do monitoring and logging for like deeper troubleshooting of stuff. Certainly that connection to product and R&D, because you are gonna need to be able to ingest features as they are developed. You need some support, like where's the red panic button if something goes wrong, and I'll throw you a kudos, Jacob. We had a pre-sales escalation channel with support, so we were treated like our most important customers, which were on the scale of like the Olympics and the Grammys. If something went wrong in pre-sales, we could press that button and we would have instant support.
Yeah, I remember it was called pre-sales emergency help. You type pre-sales emergency help into any channel in Slack, and it told you what to do.
Jacob, give me one more challenge that you're going to run into when maintaining an in-house environment. Just one more.
I think it's about the, I'm going back to customizations, right? Like how much customization can you actually achieve in the demo environment? And don't get me wrong, I think that every company at some point should have a demo team, right? Of some sorts, but they should be creating stories. They should be doing stuff like that. And if you're spending a lot of time creating customization, like tools for customization, you're probably not spending the right time. And the reality is that everybody can customize their demo 100%. It's just about how much time it's going to take. Right. And you need to have tools to get that time down as much as possible.
Real quick, like what you said about having that demo team focusing on stories and enabling that type of customization, it's almost crosses to enablement. Like it's not sales enablement, it's pre-sales enablement. How do I enable my SEs to tell compelling stories leveraging the demo tools that we have, right? How can I develop models and frameworks? And I always think of the fight between blobs and chunks in content. The chunks always win, right? You want to have little modular bits of content, little story bites or spells that you can recombine in different ways, that SEs can put together really compelling use case or vertical based demos with, as opposed to like, here's your long demo script, go learn it and memorize it and click.
It's really interesting. So how much customization can you really add, Dan? Like how deep can you go obviously the answer is it's infinite, but where would you focus your time on customization?
I would focus my time on, like I said before, the data and the content. So how do I quickly replace images, styling, text, charts, like all the things that would tell the story to a prospect. So, if you work for a company that makes, really cool, like stuffed animals, like really great stuffed animals, like my son got me this for Father's Day the other year. I want to see content around, stuffed animals and kids or enthusiasts. I want to see charts around revenue that are right-sized for the types of products that I'm selling. I want to see images, and I want to see maybe most importantly is I want to see the flows or the stories that are persona kind of base, where I am a marketer and I need to make a new campaign targeting, stressed out IT people with this awesome stuffed animal. And look how easily I can create a segment of these people based on this machine learning data. And look how easily I can build a campaign. And now look how easily I can measure the performance of that campaign. Like those little stories are what help prospects imagine themselves being successful with your solution. That's where I would focus on the customization.
And I agree with, it's about a story. What I would add to that is, to me, it's about the result of the story, right? Because very often, and I see this all the time, unfortunately, we misunderstand what it means to do a demo, in a sense. We focus on, I call it what, how, and why, right? What does it do? Why does it do it? Or what's the value? And how does it do it? And very often we focus too much on the how. And I think it's the result. So you need to customize as much as you can in order to show the correct results to the customer, because that's how you prove the what and the why. And maybe later you can focus on the how, but you don't have to do that in your first demos, right? Or in some of your demos. So it's
the how often is like software requires implementation, usually, with some exceptions. So that's the how. Like, we'll figure this out together if we partner, but let me show you what the end state is going to look like.
I like how you did that there, Dan. That makes a lot of sense. But
yeah,
Jacob,
and it's,
go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to add, like, you're selling a database product, right? That helps you build dashboards. Do you demo?
Better look really good,
right? Do you demo beautiful, amazing dashboards with relevant data to the customer, or do you demo the database tables to them? Well, I say you demo the dashboards, because that's the result of using the product.
Yeah.
The customer will probably already know there are some database tables behind it. So don't customize that. Customize the result.
Yeah.
Customize the result.
Like it.
Write that down.
Yeah. Trademark, Jakub Suchy.
Trademark.
Customize the result. Okay, I like that. Dan, how do you evaluate the time versus the cost and resources of an in-house demo environment? Or is it even measurable? I know I was kind of poking at it before, trying to, get an idea, but like, how do you do that? You're responsible for these people. You're responsible for this time. You answer to people. So how do you, when they say, hey, what should we be doing this? What is the time versus cost for the resources?
Yeah, I think you have to look at maybe from the other direction, like how would you measure success? Like what is the outcome that you're trying to get to here? So if I'm thinking about making an investment in demo environments or demo technology, I want to think about how is this going to impact the amount of revenue that I can gain, right, through my SE function. How is this going to impact my tech win rate? How is this going to impact my deal velocity? Things like that. So I would want to carefully balance that investment. And sometimes, honestly, it's hard to model it. We have to make our best guess. We have to stick our finger in the wind and kind of be like, all right, here's, let's use our best brains and talk to the people that are around us that hopefully are much smarter than we are and try to figure out a model. So if I have one person on my team of 5 who's dedicated to like building these demo tools and maintaining an environment, is that going to enable the rest of us to have some incremental amount more of revenue?
What do you
Something
do
like that?
Like a napkin or an Excel spreadsheet? Like how do you work that math?
I just do it in my head, man. I mean, no. No, so yeah, like you can make a spreadsheet. I mean, it's not like hard math that you're trying to do, but you're really just trying to like make a model that is going to be unique to your particular situation. And I think of some software that really is very Katz, like it's just a PLG. It works. It's not very customizable. It provides a very fixed sort of function. Then it may not make a lot of sense to invest in tools where you're customizing that, because the customers aren't customizing it. You don't need that ability to as much to sell. if it's something that's very technical and configurable and
like we already established that every activity an SE does needs to bring in $12,000 to $15,000 in ARR. So let's make an assumption that it does, that everything's working, your win rate is where it needs to be. So if you do what Dan just established, can you enable the SE to do one more activity a week? Keep it that way. So that's what, 15, sorry, that's 45-ish extra activities a year. 45 times 10,000 is 450,000, right? It's a
he
back
did
of
do
the
that
napkin.
in his head. Did you see that?
I like that, Jacob. I like that. I like that. Imagine how much free time your SEs would have if you just use Demo Stack, by the way. If you do have any questions, we've got a few minutes left here. I've got a couple more questions, but if you do, drop them in the Q&A. Don't be shy. So Dan, let me ask you, when you're building a demo environment, what causes you the most stress? What's giving you anxiety? What's keeping you up? What's keeping you from dreaming about Southern Maryland crab cakes at night? Because you're so stressed out about this demo environment.
Be able to do customizations, or you won't be able
Is
to
it gonna
tell
work under
stories that
pressure?
you need to
Would be
sell.
one.
It
I'm
works
the
when
numbers guy. Dan has
my
nightmares
developers
about demand
are
supply
showing me,
sheets from me.
and
I
I can
do.
play with it. I'm one
And
person.
I'm-
If I have 10 SEs that are using it all at the same time, or 4 of them are trying to import some data at the same time, and someone else is doing a demo, do I have that resiliency and robust environment that I need that's going to be able to scale? So maybe scale is, because it's again, this is sort of our like cognitive biases. Like, it's really easy to think that you're doing a great thing if it's just you doing it or a few people doing it. When things start to break down is when it scales, when you have multiple people involved, multiple things happening simultaneously. And that's something that definitely would keep me up at night.
Jacob, you look like a guy who doesn't get easily stressed, but I'm curious, is there anything that might keep you up at night when it comes to a demo environment?
I live on stress. I agree with that. You know, it's almost like a cognitive dissonance to me. We're saying we're selling an amazing product. We are, right? And the product always works. So we can demo it, right? So it will never break. Well, that's cognitive dissonance. It breaks all the time. We just don't know it. Or it breaks under those circumstances that normal customers don't even see.
Right.
It's because this is important, but we're selling. We might be selling a product that's about to enter a beta stage or is just about to be released. So of course there's bugs, right? Of course it might not work. And it creates this stress for your SCs that's unfair to them. I think that we talked about a story where I did a demo at sales kickoff. And at sales kickoff, we were demoing like a beta product. And it was amazing. I was on stage, but the secret was that nobody knew was that under certain circumstances, in a specific scenario of the demo, the product just crashed. And what we ended up doing is I had an SC who ended up being a hero who couldn't pay attention because he was sitting in the back of the room watching the logs, and as soon as it crashed, he restarted the product for me. So on stage, I didn't have to do the restart, you know, and that just happens, and you have to deal with it. And when you deal with it, you're creating stress, and you're creating heroes, and you're just creating unfair situations for people. Plus, I personally think that, you know, that story that the AE says, hey, can you show them this? Right? And you as an SC, you're like, no, why did you ask me that? And if you're really strong SC, you go to the AE after the demo and very politely, right? Say, hey, please, I have a plan. Don't ever say that again, right? Because you're not showing it because that feature is broken or something like that, right? That's creating stress too.
Yeah, we need less stress in life. But do you remember, Jacob, we used to say that pre-sales was like the only customer that the company had that would try to use all of the products and features together? If you imagine the day-to-day life of a customer using a product, they may have a problem, they'll have support, it can be resolved, even if it's like a big customer or they're using it in a very, mega scale way. But pre-sales often is the only customer that's trying to do all these things that none of the other customers are doing. And
Trying to pick
so there's a big unknown as to whether stuff actually will work.
Right.
There's a cowboy factor or cowgirl factor.
I love that. Cow person.
Yeah. Cow person.
All right, last chance for questions. Otherwise, gentlemen, very grateful for both of you to be here today. If you are an attendee today, definitely check out DemoStack on LinkedIn. Tons of great content revolving around all things sales engineering, but also tied into a lot of sales and how that works out. You can find Jakub at allthingsdemo.com if you need help with your demo, if your team is struggling, if your AEs are struggling at giving demos. That's the guy you want to talk to, depending on where he is in your box. You want to talk to Jakub.
Thanks.
And of course, Dan is our head of sales engineering at DemoStack. So Dan, I got news for you. We got to get you into Phoenix, into this DemoStack studios in Scottsdale.
Sounds good. I look forward to it.
Yeah. Jakub, what about you? You coming to the Southwest anytime this year?
If you invite me, I'll come.
You're always invited, Jakub. It's an open invitation.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. Well, since we have no more questions, thanks again. Check out Jakub at All Things Demo. Follow Dan Katz on LinkedIn. All right. Thanks, everyone. And we'll see you at the next one. Keep following, because now we're going to talk about how to actually solve for this. See you soon.